Hi, this is Peter Friedrich, and today we're speaking with Faher Jalu about the Kashmir issue. So Faher, I want to welcome you here and thank you in advance for offering your time and being willing to express what's on your heart and what's in your mind about Kashmir. You're from Kashmir, aren't you?
Thanks, Peter. Yes, that is right. I was born in Kashmir. I was brought up in Kashmir, and I moved to the UK nearly 10 years ago now, just over 10 years. And I have been working here since. And first of all, Peter, just to put this on record, I do wish to thank you for the efforts you have been putting in to actually bring out the voices of Kashmir in times where people are speaking to everyone except for the people who are being impacted by all the changes that are being put through by India. And I, in terms of introduction, my schooling. So I was 18 when I moved to the UK. Since then, till then, I was full time staying in Kashmir, in its main city called Srinagar.
Okay, and so can you tell us a little bit, Faher, what is happening in Kashmir right now and how is it personally impacting you?
Right. So right now, what's happening in Kashmir is nothing different with what had been happening over the last 30. That is my life, and I know some people tell me that that had been happening for a longer time. But I can tell you about the last 30 years. So if you look at my childhood, I was born in 1988, which is the sort of we call it the generation of the conflict of Jammu and Kashmir, and that is when the armed rebellion started. Many historians will tell you that the reason that our armed rebellion started was India rigged election in 1987, where they arrested all of the leaders, mainstream leaders, people who used to support India, and then put in a stooge there. And this time, conveniently, this was Farooq Abdullah, a long time ago. And I do apologize if my sort of my I'm not a historian. If there are factual inaccuracies in my history, I do welcome you correcting me or anyone else correcting me. I do welcome that. And a similar sort of thing happened in 1953 as well, where on the receiving end was Sheikh Abdullah, who is popularly known as Sher Kashmir. And now what has happened in 2019 is the repeat of the entire thing, where you got all the mainstream politicians, people who used to support India and Pakistan, India and Kashmir, and used to sell the idea of India in Kashmir, are all behind bars or have been detained, have been arrested, and God knows what they have done to the people who are fighting for separation from India. We don't know. There is no news coming out of Kashmir right now, but going back to what's happening in Kashmir right now, what I believe is happening in Kashmir is an extension of a BJP agenda. So BJP is a sort of a son-daughter organization of a bigger organization called RSS, whose vision is to create this one India, which is sort of Hindu Rashtra, and this is their open policy.
Just for the record, Hindu Rashtra is this idea of a Hindu nation. And the way that I've seen it defined is that the RSS, which is this mother organization of the BJP, adheres to an ideology known as Hindutva, which holds that all non-Hindus in India are foreign to India, and that India should be a Hindu nation for Hindu people.
That is absolutely right, and you could see this. So I know something drastic happened on 5th of August, but this has been building up for the last 5 years. You could see in mainland India, let alone Kashmir. Let's leave Kashmir outside for a bit. In mainland India, Muslims, Christians being treated as second-class citizens. They were lynching in the name of Lord Ram, which are currently happening. And there was a case, the judgment for which was given out day before yesterday.
This is the Pelucan case, which came out yesterday. Yes.
This is Pelucan. The reason I picked this up is to show you the sense of direction where BJP was already going, and then bringing in sort of perspective what Kashmir is going through right now. So you could see the alienation, the sort of deliberate alienation of minority communities. I'm not just saying Muslims. There are other people who were being persecuted in the name of religion. You could not you could not challenge the sort of that narrative in India, because you would be branded as anti-national, and then sedition charges. Because well, oddly enough, India still has sedition rules, even though the country that brought it into India was colonial Britain, and and Britain has gotten rid of those rules. India still has those rules, and you would see prominent leaders, prominent journalists being slapped with sedition charges just because they were challenging a narrative, a majority narrative of Hindu Rashtra, in a sort of religious-driven Hindu country. Now, bringing that in perspective of Kashmir, if you look at India as a whole, and for the purpose of this discussion, I am considering Jammu and Kashmir as part of India. I know it's a UN-recognized disputed territory. For the purpose of just this discussion, I'm considering it part of India. If you look at the wider Indian demographic, the only place which doesn't have the same majority as the rest of the Indian states was Jammu and Kashmir. So, and even so, the power center of Jammu and Kashmir is populated by majority Muslims, which is Srinagar. That's where all the politicians grow up from. That's where all politicians come up from. So this has been going on since I think 2007, 2008, all this started, where BJP started pushing their agenda / narrative in Jammu, which is a sort of, it's part of Jammu and Kashmir. It is a slightly smaller part, has got a smaller population than Srinagar, than Kashmir. Started pushing this narrative in Jammu, where they said, you are being discriminated against. Look, we are fighting for your rule. We're fighting for your sort of rights, and we will bring you those rights. So they started building this narrative in 2007, 2008, and since then you see that no one else except for BJP wins from there in elections. So pushing it, fast tracking it to 2018, not 2018, 2016, I think the government between BJP and PDP came in. So you had a mandate where Kashmiris predominantly voted for PDP, and Hindu majority in Jammu, which had that sense of division, had that sense of alienation from already alienated people, where they were being sold an idea that you are being discriminated in a country which is of the same religion as you. So they were sold this idea that just because you live in a Muslim majority state, that stops us from bringing development to you, which is incorrect. We'll come to that in a bit as well. So BJP and PDP came into power, and BJP saw this as an opportunity. And I don't want to comment what the intention of PDP was when joining the power with BJP. It's better known to them. But BJP must have seen it as an opportunity to actually do something they have been their mother sort of organization has had the vision for 70, 80 years, Hindu Rashtra. And that is why you see that even though the government in Jammu and Kashmir fell apart nearly 2 years ago, there haven't been assembly elections in Jammu and Kashmir, even though they held parliamentary elections there. So recently, when Narendra Modi got elected in his second term, they held parliamentary election and denied.
No, this last parliamentary election was in April, May.
Yeah.
And prior to that, in Jammu and Kashmir, the last assembly election to elect representatives for the state government was, I believe, in 2014.
That may be right. As I said, feel free to correct me on factual inaccuracies. But if it was 2014,
the point being merely is that it's been a very long time since the people of Jammu and Kashmir had an opportunity to actually engage in the democratic process and elect representatives.
So exactly my point. And in Kashmir, misaligned with the rest of India, you choose legislative assembly for the period of 6 years, not 5 years. So BJP broke apart halfway through their term and imposed a central rule in Jammu and Kashmir, which is a sort of governor's rule. And they saw this as an opportunity. They are an opportune organization to impose, to sort of rule Jammu and Kashmir as well. And things took a very interesting sort of turn when when parties from Kashmir or parties that were not BJP tried to get together to form the government, and they sent in, and you might have heard it from press that some people had to tweet their letters to the governor of Jammu and Kashmir saying, "We have got enough support. We are ready to form the government. You should not dissolve the legislative assembly." Right? This happened, I think, last year, and the reason the governor put forward why he dissolved the assembly nevertheless was because his fax machine was broken and he did not get the fax in time. Now, yeah, if you're working, if you that sort of analogy, if you are trying to get out of bring your homework to school, you can say my dog ate my homework. But if you're dealing with the state, if you're dealing with the lives of 15 million people, that doesn't work. You should maintain the spirit of the role you hold.
Okay.
So
Okay. So Fihar, let me as we remain unsure whether or not the governor's fax machine was actually broken or not, and of course we're certain that that's not a particularly worthwhile excuse for the actions that occurred. Let me ask you about the current events in Jammu and Kashmir, and on a personal level, how has it impacted you?
So current events, Kashmir is blocked from the rest of the world. And as we were speaking about this in advance of our interview, these are fundamental rights that we in the Western world take for granted. Being able to communicate, pick up the phone and speak to someone else, right? It is my choice. I pay for it and I do it. And I've got the right to do it. Kashmiris, including my parents right now, have not been able to speak with me for nearly 12 days, nearly 2 weeks.
So it's been 12 days since you've spoken with your parents?
Yeah, the last time I spoke to them was 4th of August, the Sunday before the Article 370 was abrogated or sort of diluted, whatever the legal term is. So this is, in any sort of sensible, humane sort of society, this is unimaginative, right? You cannot imagine people being disconnected just because a government wants to push a law through in the name of development, which I seriously conflict. But in the name of development, they did it. But you do not cut me off from my loved ones. You do not strip away my right of speaking to my parents or their right to speak to their child. And now, I would genuinely every single morning before I come to work, I would wake half an hour early just to speak to my mom, because she would call me. Even if I was in shower, when I come out of shower, I would have had 10 missed calls from her, and it used to get me irritated slightly. But now, because this has happened, I feel sort of ashamed of myself for thinking that, and it has brought me even closer to my parents in a way, but closer where I can't even speak to them. Right? That is, I am angry about it. I feel that my fundamental rights have been taken away. I feel that this should not happen to any one of my enemies as well. So even if I hate someone, this sort of thing should not happen to them, and this thing should not happen in a civilized world. So I can't tell you what is happening in Kashmir right now. What I can tell you is my perspective of how I feel, what my parents will be going through. So my father has got asthma. I don't know whether he's got enough inhalers at home. Now, people will tell you that there are medicine shops open in Kashmir, but how do you get there if everything is blocked, right? People will tell you that there is cash in ATMs. How do you get to those ATMs if the Indian security guard outside my house isn't letting them out? Essentially, media coverage currently says that X number of leaders have been detained. I think it's 700 leaders. All leaders have been detained. It's not just 700 people. It is roughly 8 million people have been detained, have been restricted from their normal routine life. And it's not something that Kashmiris brought upon themselves. This was imposed on them unilaterally. and some would say against the spirit of Indian Constitution. The way it was done, playing around with the words in the Constitution to take. So I belong to a profession which is slightly related to legal as well. We do it every day, but that is general law. We don't do it with the Constitution of a country. That defeats the whole purpose. When they stand, these ministers in Delhi, when they stand up and swear by this document, it sort of brings out their hypocrisy and their sort of their, what's the word, their sinister intentions towards it. But that is what I feel is happening in Kashmir, and I hope that this blockade is removed, so people who are not being able to get in touch with their loved ones are able to do so as soon as possible.
Well, on the constitutional issue, Bahar, it makes me think of America, where I grew up, which has one of the world's oldest constitutions. And as I understand the process for changing or amending the constitution there, every single state has to, or the assembly of every single state has to ratify individually any change to the constitution and approve it. And then it has to get passed through Congress, passed through Senate, signed by the president. It's a very, very difficult thing to change or amend the Constitution. It's an extremely lengthy process. And people have talked about doing it, but it's almost never happened in the history of the country, except for on a few occasions, because it's so difficult. But yes, go ahead.
It is. So even in India, if we go by the letter of the Constitution, the part that they abrogated or they diluted, it does say. So I'll demonstrate the circularity in their argument. So I have read. So when this all happened, I did. So the first thing I did was I printed off a copy of Indian Constitution. I've got it at home. It's a 300 or 400 page document, and I read through.
I believe
it's a very long.
In the world.
Yeah. So I read Article 317 in it, which says the president can abrogate it or abrogate any provisions of that article with coherence, with consultation with the legislative. I think it's the Constituent Assembly, which is mentioned in there. Now the Constituent Assembly does not exist in Jammu and Kashmir anymore, right? There is Legislative Assembly. One would assume that in the spirit of Constitution, they should have consulted the Legislative Assembly, which is the people representing the people of Jammu and Kashmir, right? Now, what they did was they introduced another part of legislation. BJP, when I say they, I mean BJP. They introduced another legislation very recently in respect of Jammu and Kashmir, where they convinced the parliament to give all the powers that vested with the Legislative Assembly to the Parliament of the Union of India. So this was a side play. Their sinister motives are already clear. I think they have that is, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm come from a similar profession, but not a lawyer, so I cannot vouch for accuracy. It around with the spirit of Constitution just to get what they wanted, what their constituency wanted, which unfortunately is something which is not right for Kashmiris. Right? If BJP is coming to power with 300 odd seats with an absolute majority, people in India want them to do something, and this was one of the points in their manifesto. But because of the quirkiness of the legislation, they had to play around with the spirit of the Constitution in order to water it down. I think I, as a Kashmiri, leave me alone, right? Leave Kashmiris alone. I think today Indians who stand up to stand up for the Indian flag or who are patriotic should be worried about this, should be sort of nervous about it, because if this is happening to Kashmir, this can happen to them tomorrow. Their rights can be curtailed as well. And unless someone,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that reminds me of a famous quote from a pastor, Martin Niemöller, in Nazi Germany, where he wrote something along the lines of, first they came for the communists and I said nothing because I wasn't a communist. And then they came for the trade unionists and I said nothing because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for these other people and I said nothing because I wasn't one of them. Then they came for me and I said, and there was no one left to speak for me.
Exactly.
It reminds
And
me of that situation where this precedent that's being set that
mhm,
if this can happen to Kashmiris, or if this can happen to Muslims, or if this can happen to Christians, or if this can happen to Dalits, or any of these communities, and these people aren't speaking out and nobody's speaking out for them,
yeah,
eventually it's going to come to it. It's going to be happening to you
yeah,
and who's going to be left to speak for us.
absolutely, and absolutely. And the problem with India right now is the independence of the media as well, because media is responsible for disseminating right information to people and helping them make informed decisions about
But
their governments.
let me stop you there. I have a question. Is the role of media to report what the government tells them is happening and to report the government lying?
Uh, it is so. In an ideal world, it should be telling the people that government is lying. That is what the role of the media should be,
Or, or,
because
or, or
otherwise,
perhaps, or perhaps simply maybe telling the people that the government is lying, or perhaps simply should it be to inquire about the reality of what's happening and to actually go out into the real world and investigate and report facts.
I agreed. Agreed. And there are lots of people in India who are doing it with respect to Kashmir. I think there was a working group of some people who went to Kashmir a few days ago,
Couple
and
of
they came back and tried to present in a press club Delhi of the pictures and the videos that they had taken from J&K, and they weren't allowed to do so. This is the level of independence that press or media in India enjoys. Even though they claim to be the world's largest democracy, look, these are not the features of democracy. In US, you can go up to Trump and say, "Look, you are answerable to me." In India, you can't go to Prime Minister Modi, even though we claim Trump is the world's most powerful person and Modi is not, right? So I have got the right to go and speak to Trump and say that you're wrong. I don't have the right to and do the same thing to Prime Minister Modi, and I'll be lynched. If I did so, I would be killed. I will be lynched, right? That is what was happening, and that I will be branded anti-national and then put behind bars, right? This is the recurring thing that has been happening since 2014 when BJP came into power. For for all the bad things that Congress did to Kashmir, right? They were not this brutal, right? And this what happened in on 5th of August. I feel humiliated by it as well in a way, because if someone, what gives that guy the right to decide my future? No one does, right? What gives anyone else in Delhi the right to decide my future without consulting me, right? And they did not consult me or any of my leaders. That is why there were those provisions in the constitution that you had to consult with the local legislative assembly, which is the representation, and that did not happen. And isn't that a violation of my rights? I would have assumed so. It is. And if it's violation of my rights, it is the violation of nearly. I wouldn't restrict this to just Jammu and Kashmir. It is the violation of 15 million Jammu and Kashmiris, people who live in Jammu and Kashmir. It is the violation of their rights as well. And they did it on a false narrative. And you can check it. There are post 5th of August. There were a number of studies that came out in respect of development index of Jammu and Kashmir. I do not consider Jammu and Kashmir to be developed, first of all, because I live in London. London is far, far, far developed in Jammu and Kashmir. I don't, but when you compare it with some of the other Indian states, you will be surprised, right? Our infant mortality rate is sort of lower. Our life expectancy is higher. Our sort of number of people living below poverty line is lower. So these development indices, if these facts are taken into account, the government of BJP, the government of India, lied to their people in the parliament. And if that isn't the biggest crime in democracy, I don't know what is. And and
So
and you
as we consider these crimes in democracy, and among them we look at, as you mentioned, this team that went to Kashmir just the other day and they returned to Delhi It was led by Jean Dries and some other people. And they did on the ground reporting. They talked with Kashmiris and they brought back pictures and video footage. And then they had a press conference at the press club in Delhi. And I just
Yeah.
saw this morning that after they had been denied the right to show this film that they'd produced from Kashmir, that the report this morning was saying that the government would not allow them to show it because they won't allow them to show anything that goes against the government
Yeah,
position. So
that is right. That
as we consider this and how in this environment people are being banned, forbidden from propagating any idea that goes against the government position and what that means for democracy. I want to ask you, as we kind of move to a conclusion, about
yeah.
your experiences growing up in Kashmir. What was it like for you? You've alluded to this difference between being in Kashmir and being in the West, and how there is such a stark difference. What was it like?
Look, as I said, I was born in '88, and which was the sort of peak of when the armed rebellion started and Indian soldiers started pouring in. I'll tell you a few things. So every single morning I did not know whether my school was open or not. I was excited with the prospects of getting a holiday at the same time, right? You don't know. That is sort of I'm giving a funny twist, a humorous twist to it, but imagine that happening here. It is sort of sad to see children going through that. I I wasn't allowed, so so if I see people in here, very young people going out, playing with children, playing with, interacting with people. My parents would get nervous if I did not return from school in time. They would get nervous that, is he still alive? This is the reality of 1990s. And I've got a few personal examples that I can share with you. A few years ago, we used to live in downtown Srinagar, and we moved on. My father got a house elsewhere, and we shifted there in Srinagar itself. We used to live in downtown Srinagar, and one late night evening, there was an Indian Army patrol going on there, and he just peeked through the window. He just decided to look who this was, and he was shot at. I've still got a wardrobe or a cabinet in my house. We have still kept it, which has got a bullet mark of a bullet going in and a bullet going out, just for peeking through a window. I know
This is your father was shot at?
this is my father, right? And when I was 16, I used to study in one of the reputed schools of Jammu and Kashmir. It's called Tendal Bisco School. And I was 16, 17 back then. I was wearing a school uniform, and this policeman stopped me. When I say policeman, it's Indian police forces, not a Kashmiri one. Stopped me and said, "Yeah, show me your ID card." And he had sinister motives right from the start, right? I said, "Here's my ID card." In those days, you used to get a picture as an ID card. It wasn't an electronic ID card or a biometric permit. It used to be a photograph stuck onto a piece of paper with a school stamp on it. And he said, "It doesn't work. This is not what I'm looking for." And they detained me for 2 hours. And this is me, 16-year-old. And I don't come from a village in Kashmir, right? I know I was slightly more aware of my rights. My parents were slightly more influential than other people, and they started slapping me without any reason. And I was in my school uniform just outside my school. They detained me and started slapping me for no reason and wanted me to chant slogans in favor of India. That, even though I did at that point, that did not make me any more Indian, if that makes sense. And there are many stories, and this is just my personal experience. And this is where it all began to unravel for me.
And I'm
When I
sorry if I can stop you there, and please, I hope you hold on to your train of thought.
Yeah.
That scenario, it makes me think and analogize my own growing up in California, and what it would have been like if I had been walking down the street and police had detained me and taken me into custody for some hours, and then started hitting me, and then started telling me to say things like, America's the greatest country on earth, or to,
Yeah.
you know, say the
Not,
Pledge of Allegiance.
not just hitting you at the barrel of the gun. You had a gun pointed at you. If you reacted any other odd way, it wasn't a slap that was coming your way. It was a bullet that was coming your way, and point blank, that would have there was a good chance that I could have been one of those 8,000 disappeared people from Jammu and Kashmir. But luckily, it did not happen. And what is the most ironic thing? I went to see my parents afterwards, and one of my uncles used to be a very high bureaucrat in Jammu and Kashmir administration, and he goes, "Look, I can't do anything. They are not accountable to us." That is where you feel when you got something going on in your life. If your parents tell you that it's all okay, you get that strength, and that is the point I still remember. Shattered me from within, and the reason I remember the entire episode is because of that. Where a person who was much more powerful than me goes on to me and say, "Yeah, they hit you, they detain you, but I can't do anything." That's a big problem, right? And this was nearly 10-15 years ago. The things are the same. If you read the news, if you follow Jammu and Kashmir politically, you will hear about teachers getting picked up from their houses, kids as small as 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds getting picked up midnight from their houses and getting detained. It's a 10-year-old baby, kid, right? What harm can he bring to the country? Right? He hasn't even got a mobile phone where he can sort of create a revolution. But you are detaining him. You are creating that psyche within the local population that you are subjugated, and it is that people, when the vent opens up, you see this in Kashmir every single time. When if and when something triggers a protest, it's not just 10 people coming out. It is the entire population that has come out. So now this Article 370 happened. There will be a trigger somewhere down the line, God forbid, and I hope there isn't, and there will be people coming out again. What happens then? There isn't a leader. I don't see that vision from India right now. They have done this, right? I don't know the legality of this. I know the spirit side of it, that it should not have been done. I don't know the legality of this. But what next, right? Is anyone telling us what next? Well, they have detained all the leaders from Jammu and Kashmir who had that sort of connect with people. No one knows.
So as we ponder on what is next for Jammu and Kashmir, Fehar, and move to a conclusion, my final question for you is, with this cycle of these protests, these clampdowns, these protests, these clampdowns, these protests, these clampdowns, and on. And as you mentioned, it's not just some people turning out on the streets, it's the entire population.
Yeah.
With that scenario, how do you feel about the future of Kashmir? What does it look like to you? We don't know the future, but as far as your feelings about what you hope for and what you think might happen.
I have got a hope that Kashmir comes out of the cycle of violence, but it serves the constituency of Indian politicians to keep Kashmir burning, and it equally serves other people as well. I won't name anyone else because we're focusing discussion on just Kashmir and India. It serves a lot of people to see Kashmir burning. It suits some people more and some people less. I've got a genuine hope that people are not denied their political rights any further. I have a hope that rule of law prevails. So I have a hope, and when I say rule of law, I say that 70,000 people, innocent people, have died in Kashmir in the last 30 years. I want those to be investigated, right? Who did those? Why did those? Why did they do it? I want those investigated, and even if it takes a long time, I want the guys to be punished for that. It is only and India keeps on talking about integrating, and that's how you integrate with people. That's how you gain trust of people. That would have been a great first step, investigating all those killings.
So justice would be a great first step towards integrity. and making
I
if the goal is to make Jammu and Kashmir an integral part of India, then the
I th-
first step would be justice.
I think it would be justice, but as I said, in 1953, and this is something that one of leaders of Jammu and Kashmir, Shah Faisal, before he got arrested, said. In 1953, my grandfather's generation got betrayed. In 1987, my father's generation got betrayed, and in 2019, our generation got betrayed. Right now, the situation in Kashmir is, if there is no one, there is no leader who will be ready to fight election as a face of India now. Uh, unless the guys who are in detention reach a deal with the Union of India and try to act as a stooge rather than a leader, that's a different story, right? There won't be anyone who can face Kashmiri people right now, because the mainstream parties of that used to fight elections had an agenda. One of them had greater autonomy as an agenda, which was national conference. That has gone down the drain, right? It's not coming back again. PDP, self-rule, was the vision of Kashmir. That has gone. It's safe to say that that's not happening anymore under India. And then one of the other leaders, Sajad Lone, he had a vision of a similar sort of setup as an Ireland, a Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. But clearly, India isn't interested in that. So, what do you fight your elections on now? People of Kashmir have never been interested in sort of as a solution to Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. People of Jammu and Kashmir have never been interested in roads, houses, or facilities as a solution to Kashmir. It solves their short-term problems. That's fine. That is why these leaders were there. But as a solution to Kashmir, you will find a resounding majority doesn't consider development as a solution to Kashmir. It is an identity. I identify myself as a Kashmiri, right? You cannot strip that identity out of me, right? Now, what you can do is my sort of solution to the entire problem. I was discussing it with someone else. Could be, and it's a far-fetched idea. Open borders. It does. So, for example, when you travel within Europe, I have traveled within Europe where I have crossed a border wearing slippers and shorts, informal, right? As if I was going to a friend's house. Why not have that greater subcontinental unity? But there are vested interests that won't let that happen. That is my conclusion. I am doing right now what the world leaders should be doing, speaking up. That is what their mandate is. Speak up about the right abuses. Yes, facilities are fine, and peace is fine. Even graveyard is peaceful and silent, but that is not good peace, good silence, right? That is my vision of Kashmir. I hope peace prevails. I sincerely hope not even a single life is lost from now onwards. I genuinely hope and that all the killings in Jammu and Kashmir, all 70,000 or whatever the official figure is, get investigated by sort of unbiased, independent bodies, and all the culprits are punished. Even if it is people from Jammu and Kashmir that are responsible for those killings, I want them punished. Even if it's my neighbor, even if it's my family, I want them punished because they are responsible for killing 70,000 people, and 70,000 people is a huge number of souls. Imagine their families, right, fighting for justice for the last 30 years. There are people who who have been sort of who are off the who have disappeared off the record. No one knows where they are. There are half widows in Jammu and Kashmir. No one sort of tries, and I find this really, really, really ironic when the Prime Minister of India says about gender equality. Gender equality is fine. Give women of Jammu and Kashmir their fundamental rights first. Rights to see their rights to know what happened to their relatives, right to justice. And I think once that is done, that will be one small step towards integration of people. I'm not saying integration of Jammu and Kashmir with India or integration of Jammu and Kashmir with Pakistan or independence. That is for the people of Jammu and Kashmir to decide what they want. I cannot be the sole judge of it, right? I can tell you what my views are, but I can't tell you what the people of Jammu and Kashmir think.
Well,
I think,
on gender equality, it
yeah,
reminds me that, as you said, even a graveyard is silent and peaceful. And on the issue of gender equality, there's this need for these fundamental rights, as you mentioned, to be protected
yeah,
for everybody, for men, for women. And one doesn't hope for a society in which everybody is equally oppressed, but rather a
yes,
society
exactly.
in which everybody has equal rights and actually has rights. So,
Yeah.
Faher, I really want to thank you for your time, and I
No,
deeply
thank you.
your thoughts and your eloquently expressed opinions on this issue. And I look forward to a hopeful future where justice
Mhm.
does prevail in Kashmir.
Hopefully it will. Hopefully it will. But thanks a lot, Peter. Thanks for your time. I know you've been doing a lot of good work in respect of Kashmir over the last couple of days or last few weeks. I hope you carry on with it. I I genuinely hope that you or someone else becomes a source of channeling all those miserable stories into the ears of the world leaders. And I think if you do that, or if that should be the primary responsibility of all journalists, all media outlets, and not just propagate what the governments tell them to.